All right, so let's talk about the requirements for the final project. Right, so these are all minimum requirements. You're free to build on this if you want, and also these are functional requirements. Right, so you're free to move or implement it in some other way, but the functionality should be there. Right, so let's talk about some of the requirements on some of the pages or screens that are required for the project. First, there needs to be some kind of landing page, right? That is the first thing that a user sees, right? So when they visit your application, your website, there should be some landing page, and this landing page, or you can refer to as the home page, should be um, uh, uh, should be based on who is currently looking at this page, right? So if you're logged in, and I know who you are, the homepage should have content that is specific to you, right? If I don't know who you are because you've not logged in, it should have information that is generic, right, for anybody. Okay, so depending on whether I know you're logged in or not, it should either have anonymous content or generic content, or logged in content. Right. So if I log in, then maybe the homepage might list the latest movie that I liked, okay, or the latest person that I'm following, or the latest tweet by somebody, right, that is pertaining to me. Right. So there should be at least one thing that is pertaining to me. If it's generic, and then it should have generic content, things that anybody might see, or random content, right? So the latest person who joined the community, right, or the latest article that somebody posted, somebody generic. Yes. So the homepage should know about login information. Also from the homepage, I should have access to visit my profile, right? If I have logged in and identify myself, then I should be able to visit a page that is private to me, right? A profile page where I can access information that is pertaining to me. All my private information is in there, and anything that I ever related to in this application should be accessible through the profile. Any movie that I liked, anyone I'm following, anybody who's following me, any piece of data that is somehow related to me as a person, right, as identity, should be somehow accessible through the profile. So there should be some organized set of links or buttons or some kind of user interface that provides me access to data that is related to me. Uh, um, Now the profile should have also information that only I can see, right? Maybe my phone number, anything that is private to me, right? Should be only visible to me, but there might be some public information there as well, right? Maybe my picture is public, right? So the profile should be smart enough to know who is visiting your profile. Is this somebody who's not logged in, right? And they can view your public profile, or is this you? Right? Is this you that you're visiting, and you can view anything that is that is private to you? They should have some public details and some private details, and it's up to you to decide what is what. Okay, it's okay for you to decide, and you just let us know when you describe the project, and when you're graded on it, right? You'll tell us. It says, well, notice that when I'm logged in, I can see this, but I'm not logged in, I cannot see these other things, right? So it's up to you to decide what it means to be private or public. Also, from the home page, I can visit some. There will be some screen where I can somehow interact or query your data set, right? Whether that data set is information from the FAA about flights, or from the FCC, or from stock or medical data, whatever it is, right? I need to be able to query that data. I want to see patients, I want to see doctors, I want to see medical records, or whatever your domain is. I should be able to make a query, and it should respond with some result set. Yes, right. So that search page, this should provide some kind of form that allows me to build some query that I can then send over to some third-party API, and it comes back with the result and lists some summarized list of those results, right? So if it's doctors, maybe I see a thumbnail of the face of the doctor, maybe their specialty, maybe a really quick contact information, right, about that particular doctor. Yes, and I can see a list of them, right? So that would be a summarized result set. If I click on any one of those result sets, it should take me to some other page called the details screen, and that detail screen should give me more information about this particular doctor or movie or team or restaurant or whatever it is that the domain that you're working on. Yes, or stock, and it should maybe give me more information, more description. The awards that a particular actor won, any reviews from a movie or whatever it is that you're working on. It should give me more detail, maybe more pictures, maybe a gallery where I can peruse through. So the details page should have information that is available from some remote excuse me from some remote service. Yes. So for the data, whatever data that you're using, it should be from some third-party API. Right. So that's why you have your own database, right? So your data will always be a merging of some data that is from outside, right, plus some data that you might be storing in the database. So for instance, in a movie, uh, uh, if you're getting from IMDb or from wherever, they're not going to let you add your own reviews, right? So sure, yes, and the alternative is that you download or cache that information locally on your machine, import it maybe in your database, right? You run the risk of now owning and having to maintain that data, right? And being and becoming stale. It's preferably if somebody's responsible for maintaining some data that they QA it, they maintain it, they own it, right? And they have a process that maintains this to be your source of truth. Unless you go into that business, I would say it would be very hard for you to compete in that particular business. Yeah. 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 Yeah, so the alternative would be for you to create an entirely new data set, right? The challenge there is that to make your application realistic enough, you would have to have plenty of data, right? So that queries or interesting queries will always result with some interesting results, right? If you're doing whatever an online store, you would have to have thousands of products for it to be anywhere interesting enough for us to interact with, right? If you only have just a few dozen products, it'll be somewhat it'd be a prototype, certainly. It'd be an academic toy, but the more interesting applications would be something that has lots and lots of data, right? Unless you can find certainly some really interesting, huge amounts of data that you want to import, by all means. Yeah. Yeah, if you make it interesting enough, then you need to make your own API to expose that data. Sure. Yeah. So the details page should contain more information about that particular piece of data point, and usually this page will contain a merging of data that we have either retrieved from a remote third-party API, right? That we don't own, but we can always retrieve at any moment, plus a merging of some content from our local database, right? So for instance, you might have maybe a movie from IMDb that has all the posters and all the actors and directors and plot and all those good stuff, plus anybody in our community who reviewed that movie, right? Or liked it or starred it or bookmarked it in some fashion. All that information would be stored in your local database. right? And so you need to maintain in your database some mapping of the remote data, that so that you can merge it with some local data, right? So that you might have 20 of your local folks that are using your application who might have reviewed the same movie, right? So you would merge the remote data with all the posters and whatnot, right? Together with your local, 20 reviews from 20 different folks who have either liked it or hated the movie. And those reviews might give you references of who generated those reviews, yes? Who wrote that information about that particular data point. So that should give you references to so that you can navigate to somebody else's profile. Oh, who wrote that review? I want to click on their username, right? And that may navigate to that person's profile page, right? I can see who they are. I could see all the information about what they wrote, anything that is publicly available. What other movies have they reviewed, right? Who's following this person? And I might say, "Ooh, this guy looks interesting. I can also follow this person." Or maybe I can see their other reviews, right? I can click on their reviews. I am viewing this other person's profile. I can see all the public details, all their lists of other data that is related to that person, who's following them, who they're following, any other reviews. I can click on those reviews, and it navigates me back to other reviews other movies that person likes, right? Or other reviews that they've written about some other product. Make sense? Okay. So I can navigate from details to somebody else's profile who wrote or wrote anything about that, and then I can navigate back to the details page about a particular review that I wrote, a particular movie that I like. Let's see. Notice the requirements of mapping these screens to specific URLs. If I'm navigating to my own profile, notice that it's just /profile. See that? So how would it know which profile to show? Notice that it's not part of the URL anywhere, right? That means that the server has to maintain some kind of session information, right? When I log in, the server needs to remember that I logged in, yes, and it needs to maintain a session so that any subsequent queries to the server says, oh, it's within this context, it's within this session who's somebody's logged in. So the profile you're looking at is the profile for the latest person who has logged in. To visit somebody else's profile, notice that the URL is mapped to /profile/ the ID of the person who I'm navigating to, right? So I can navigate to somebody else's profile, but then the URL is mapped with the ID of the person who I'm navigating to. Make sense? So just profile is me, somebody else's profile is the ID. Yes. Yep. So there's several ways of maintaining sessions. The easiest one is through cookies. You might want to pop up saying that is it okay to track you, accept or not. I hate those pop-ups, so I'm totally okay if you're not. And somebody will come up with some solution that it'll automatically accept all the time. We went through this already, right? When cookies, everyone was scared about tracking or accepting whether JavaScript was running on your browser, we went through that already, right? Now there's no serious website that has JavaScript running on their browser, and we kind of forgot about that. Now it's coming back. Go back and forth for a couple of times, and then it'll just go away. So, getting off my soapbox. Notice the search here. When you click on home to navigate, the screen is mapped to search. Right? Once you are in the search screen, if you navigate to a particular item for that particular details you're looking at, you'll need some ID that uniquely identifies the item you're looking at. So this URL, this page is mapped to /details/ and the ID of the element that you're looking at. Okay. What else? A requirement that is not listed here is that this search screen once I've done my search, and it's displaying the search, it should survive a refresh, right? If I refresh the screen, right, I should be able to see the same content again, right? That's non-trivial, right? Because that content is dynamic, right? When I when I do a search and I search for for a movie, I say Batman, then I see all the Batman movies. Or if I write Star Trek, then I see all the Star Trek movies. Yes. If I refresh, when you refresh, typically the browser will just throw away everything, right? And it's completely new. And so there's a couple of strategies of doing that. Where do I remember, right? Where do I remember that the latest query? Either the server needs to remember it, right, or the client needs to remember it somehow. So one of the requirements is that this search screen, this search URL, should have at the end the by default, right? It's just plain old search, and there's nothing listed because you haven't searched for anything. But if you do a search, the state of what it is that you just searched for should be encoded as part of the URL. Okay, and so that if I refresh, I will see the same result of the latest Batman query that I made. Yes, and also I could copy the URL and email it to you. Yes, so that if you click on that link, you will see exactly what I see, right? Which is pretty interesting, right? Just like somebody emails you a link to an Amazon query, right, or a particular details page. If they click on it, they'll see exactly what you see, even though that page doesn't physically exist, right? That page is dynamically generated, right, from a lot of computation going back and forth between the client and the server, right? So, but there's enough information in the URL to recreate, right, the page from scratch. Make sense? Right. So that's non-trivial. We'll talk about how to do that. Very, very interesting. Same thing with the details, right? If I copy this link for the details and I send it to you and I email it to you, you'll see the same identical item that I'm looking at. The same reviews, the same images, the same plot, right? Again, the ID here, the ID should be enough, right, to recreate that page from scratch dynamically. Make sense? We'll talk about how to do that a little later. Right, so here the requirements are listed in somewhat formal fashion. Notice that they all say the homepage must be mapped, right? So must be mapped to either / or home, right? It must be the first page when visiting the website. Must display generic content. Must display specific content, must be clear to what the website is about, and must look polished and finished and professional. Okay, so when I come to your website, it should be clear what it's all about, right? Don't be like Google, just one search bar, and then obviously Google has gained that that reputation, right? We all know what that search bar is for, right? But when you're Google, then it's okay, right? But meanwhile, have at least a blurb or some paragraph, which makes it obvious what you want me to type in there. Okay, so your homepage should be clear what it's all about. All right. So all these must, obviously they're required, and we're going to be looking for this functionality. How you actually implement the functionality is a little bit up to you. So the profile must allow users to change their personal information. Whatever you decide what that personal information is up to you. If the user is logged in, they can see their profile, including sensitive information about themselves. Must be accessible to other users, even anonymous users. So anyone should be able to visit my profile, and then depending on your policy, you would decide that certain things are public and certain things are private, right? And your logic should be able to determine whether you're going to show the private stuff or not. Yes. Must hide personal private information, must be mapped to /profile. If you're visiting somebody else's profile, it should be /profile /profile ID. From the profile, you should have groups of links, right, that should allow you to navigate to everything that is related to me as a person, right? Anybody who I'm following, anybody who reports to me, my boss, if I reported to somebody, any messages I've sent, any stock that I'm following, any whatever portfolios that I have open, any medical records that are related to me should be accessible through the profile. Yes, anything that is related to me should be accessible through the profile, and you should group these into meaningful sections. Search and search results requirements, right? You need to provide some search query. Oh, here it is. Yeah, here's the search. When you do a search, when there's no search, it's just mapped to slash search. But if you do a search, it should have slash search slash, and then some way that you're capturing the criteria of your search, right? Maybe the movie that you search for, the title of the movie, right, or the genre of the movie, or whatever, right, or the stock name or ticker tape, right? Or criteria. It could be either slash search criteria, or it could be slash question mark criteria in the search criteria. Okay, so that if you copy that and send it to somebody, you can recreate that search. The details page requirements must have details. So yeah, read through that. Log in and register. You should be able to register yourself and identify who you are. From the registration page, there should be a mechanism by which I can choose my role. So here's one of the requirements is that you have to support at least 2 distinct human roles, right? Like faculty, a student, a buyer, and a seller, right? A team manager and a team player. Okay, so choose any 2 human beings, right? That should be distinct enough that there's at least one use case that only one of them can achieve, right? Me as a selling of products, I can create products, I can change their descriptions, I can change their price, okay. But as a buyer, I can review the product, I can buy the product, right? I can return the product. So even though we're both interacting with the same object of product, right? The one person one role has a set of use cases, and the other person has a different set of use cases. Make sense, right? And we interact through this object, right? So yes, at least 2 human roles, right? And when you register, there's always a question. Well, how do you establish your role? Right? How do you establish the role? Oftentimes, is when you register, right? When you register, you can register as if you go to eBay, you can either register, and the default is that you're a buyer, because 97% of us are buyers, and there's only 3% who are the sellers, right? And so the exceptional case might be that you are a seller, so you need to especially say that you're a salesperson as opposed to a buyer. Yes. So it'd be fine if when you're registering, you have like a drop down and you choose to be one or the other, right? In some cases, you might say that it makes no sense. Like for instance, if you go to a learning management system, it'd be weird if you could choose to be a faculty or a student, right? That typically you would have some system administrator who anoints you as being a faculty or being having certain privileges. Yes, we're not going to get into those issues. It should be as simple as in when you're registering, you choose your role. Make sense? It's also okay that in your profile, you can change your role. Okay. They say, well, now I'm a faculty, now I'm a student. It kind of makes no sense, but sure. I mean, I'm a faculty. I can also be a student. Yeah, I can keep learning a couple things. And for academic purposes, the only thing that we really want to learn is that how you write the logic, so that depending on your role, the user interface adapts to your role, right? That you see these screens or you don't see these screens. You see these links, but you don't see those other links, depending on the role. Make sense? Yes.
So my group was thinking of saying moderators, and
Yep.
say moderators going to be added by other moderators. Do we need to worry about that?
If you have a different mechanism of setting up the roles, right? If that's totally fine. Some students decide to create a system administrator, right? And this system administrator has these god powers where they can set the roles of other folks, right? And you only have just a few administrators who can log in and change these. That's totally fine. I think the easiest thing would be just to put a drop down in the registration page and be done with it. But yeah, certainly if you want to do that, that's fine. Yes.
Just a small clarify.
Yeah.
Like if I have two type of users,
Yeah.
which is the normal user and another type is an administrator, does it come for two rows?
The I used to have the administrator as a requirement. I forget if I still have it in there. Okay, looks like looks like I removed the administrator. So yes, the administrator would be a valid user role.
Okay,
Yep,
so
sure.
it comes for two types of roles.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, you have a regular human user and a non-human. Wait, no, sorry. Both humans, both humans. But yes, an administrator and an end user. Usually we call the end user, right? Also, another word about administrator roles and the end user role. So typically, the end user role is the 95% of most folks who are going to be interacting with the application. Yes, so it's typically okay to or often the case that you are have lots of imagery and lots of markety things, right? And it looks pretty and it's eye catching. Yes. Also, usually these end users are not power users usually, right? So typically you provide wizards, yes, where you walk them through a process, okay, and usually you have a low bandwidth. Whereas when you're talking about administrators, it's perfectly fine to assume that the administrator is a super user, right? They're fine with having a much higher bandwidth, okay, and to throw lots and lots of data in front of a system administrator. Yes, they're totally fine with having lots and lots of tables with lots and lots of columns, and so they're meant to process lots and lots of data, right? So you have to be careful on who your audience is and to tailor your user interface to that particular audience. Make sense? All right. Yes. Really, I removed administrator? Guess I did. All right. So homepage, profile, login. Okay, login. Privacy, policy requirements. Okay, last semester we collaborated with I collaborated with another professor who introduced a couple of requirements for privacy when you log in and you start sharing data in these websites. We created a requirement where folks would write a privacy policy, what kind of information we're keeping track of you, right? How are we keeping track of you? So this privacy policy requirement, right now it's optional. I need to check to see if we are going to do this semester with this other faculty. I'll let you know if this will be a requirement, but don't worry about it right now. Styling requirements. All content needs to be responsive. Responsive meaning that the TA is going to take their browsers and is going to start resizing every single page that they're looking at, see if your screens are still usable, right? That they still are functional, right? That things are not overlapping, something that's not covering something else, that things that should not wrap are not wrapping, right? And certain things that should wrap, they wrap correctly. Yes, right. So they're gonna make sure that whenever you're designing these things, right, you do it yourself. You test it. Right. So look at your pages in all different sizes of your screen. All right. Things that we want to avoid is that as the screen becomes smaller, the content doesn't overflow, right? Or that you add some weird scroll bars within scroll bars within scroll bars, something like that, ugly, right? There should only ever be just one scroll bar to go up and down. Okay, there might be some exceptions where it is okay to overflow. Maybe you have an image editor, right, where you need to zoom in and zoom out and be able to scroll left and right, up and down. That's okay, right? Or you might have a legitimate use of a table that is too large to fit, right? That's okay to have maybe a scroll bar just on the table, right? But usually you want to avoid at all costs any scroll bars that scroll from left to right, right? That you should only have scroll bars going up and down, right? Only in very specific use cases would you have both scroll bars, right? Where you can scroll left and right, up and down. Right? Again, with an image or a table that is too big. Yes. Yes. Uh, yeah. So it should be so the browsers will have simulators where you can simulate any phone out there. Or also you can specify exactly what size you want, and you can look at your content at any size, height and width. Okay, it should be usable, reasonably usable. Yeah, elements should not wrap unintentionally. So make sure that if things start wrapping, is because you intended it to wrap, right? Not because, oops, I didn't know this was gonna, just push down things weirdly, right? So make sure everything is intended. CSS libraries, you can use libraries such as Bootstrap or materials design, or some of these that are very very well known libraries that we're going to talk about that are developer friendly. They're meant for developing applications, right? There's quite a few, but certainly Bootstrap we're going to cover quite a bit. um, White spacing, make sure that everything is used white spacing correctly. That you have nice borders around the content, that the things are not flush against each other, that you have some margins between the elements, right? That they're consistent, that you don't have 10 pixels here, 20 pixels over there, 15 pixels over there. It's nicely evenly spaced. Things are flush, that things are aligned, right, from left justified or right justified. If it's a text, it should be justified to the left. If it's number, it should be justified to the right, right? Make good use of white spaces, right? And we'll talk about all these things. Um, so padding, margin, justification, wrapping. So make sure that you have nice, good use of white spacing. And navigation, make sure that whenever you're looking at a page, that it's clear where you can go next, right? That it's clear that maybe you can go back from where you came from, or that buttons and hyperlinks are well marked, so that I know where to go from here. What can I do? There shouldn't be a page where it's like a dead end and I don't know what to do, right? The most common error is to assume that everybody knows that the top left logo is a link back to the homepage. Okay, not everybody knows this, right? And so you're in a page and there's nowhere to click, right? But obviously there's a top left that if you click on that brings you back to the home. That's not always clear, so make sure that it's always very clear where is it that you can navigate. All right. Um, Make sure you use good contrast, right? Don't use dark gray on a black background, right? Or you have a very light text on a very bright image, right? So make sure that there's good contrast that you can read. Um, Label requirements. Make sure that everything's labeled. That that I know what you're asking me for an input field. Either use tooltips or placeholders, or just a plain old label on top of it, so I know what you're asking for. Look and feel. So it should look professional, finished, polished. you should be proud of what you're displaying, or or that you might use for a for your interviews, or using it as a portfolio. And I should be willing to use this and share it with my colleagues and say, "Ooh, look what my students are working on." Consistency. Make sure that you're consistent, right? That you use the same fonts, the same colors, the same sizes across the same color scheme. Um, uh, so make it consistent. Um, User experience requirements. We'll talk a little bit about this. Uh, Understand that your application, most everybody is moving to mobile, right? That the growth of folks using mobile is growing exponentially, less so in desktop, right? So assume that folks are going to come to your website through a mobile or tablet, and so make it as easy as possible for them, right? So use large clickable areas. Don't make sure that you don't have these small little interfaces where you have to like peck at something that's very small to click on with your thumb or your finger. If you have a product, and you have a hyperlink to navigate to the details of that product, don't just have this small little tiny hyperlink where you click on it. Maybe make the whole image clickable, right? So that you navigate to the details page. Yes. So make it as pleasant and easy for folks to navigate, back and forth between your different areas. The input fields should be large enough, right, that I can click on it, maybe take up the entire width of the screen, right, on a phone, so that wherever I click, it takes focus and I can start typing. Use the correct keyboard, right? If you're asking for an email, give me the email keyboard, right? If you're asking for a date, give me the date picker. If you're asking for a phone, give me the phone picker, right? Or if you're asking for a number, give me the number pad. Yes, right. Only when you're asking for text, give me the whole keyboard. Yes. So again, user experience. What else? Anyway, we'll talk about some more architectural requirements. So make sure that we're going to be talking about all sorts of good practice in class, and so all these good practices, all best practices, you're meant to use those same best practices in your project. Okay, make sure that if you have services that are talking back and forth between the client and the server, they're all under a service directory. If you have objects that are talking to the database, that they're all in data access objects, right? That if you have, depending on their role in the application, in the architecture, it should be very, very clear where all this lives. How to maintain state controllers, dynamic content loading. We'll talk about all these things. Also, the naming conventions, file structure, that should all be very consistent. User roles, two types of human users. Anonymous users should also be supported. Anonymous user meaning I don't know who you are, right? So there should be some use cases based on that anonymous person, right? So even though I haven't logged in, I should still be able to use your application, right? And I always get some pushback on saying, well, what about if it's some social networking, and if I don't log in, I don't have access to anything. Right? You can always come up with something that is that an anonymous user could use. Come up with something that anyone can make use of. So only ask persons to log in when it's absolutely necessary, right? When you go into your profile, you need to log in. When you need to like something, or create a review, or bookmark something, or follow somebody, you need to log in. But for everything else, searching and perusing the data set, I don't need to log in. So don't force me to log in unless absolutely necessary. Okay. Web service requirements. So either you're welcome to either go through the Node.js route or the Java RESTful service, but there needs to be a RESTful service that exposes your data set, right? That whatever you have storing in the database, you should be able to retrieve it from some RESTful API. Database, you can use either relational or non-relational. You need to create data models. You need to come up with at least two domain objects. So a domain object is a non-human object, right? That is specific to the domain you choose, right? So if it's a stock application, then maybe a company. That's a with symbol, right? And when it was incorporated and whatever, right? That's a valid domain object, right? I'm keeping track of all the companies that I'm keeping track of all the stock. A portfolio is a domain object, right? A portfolio might be a collection of a whole bunch of companies, yes, that I keep track of. Make sense? Those are two examples of a domain object. If you are in the movie business, then maybe a movie is a valid domain object, right? A movie theater is also a valid domain object. Make sense? These are all non-human things that you would need to store in a database. Okay? Make sense? So you need at least two domain objects. Okay? At least two domain objects. At least two user models. At least one-to-many relationship. A one-to-many relationship is a person has many playlists, okay, or a person likes many movies, right? Well, actually, no, that's a many-to-many, where you might have a movie is liked by many people and one person likes many movies. So I think we ask for that as well. At least one many-to-many relationship, right? A person can be assigned to many projects, and a project can have many people assigned to it. So that's a many-to-many, right? So at least one-to-many, at least one many-to-many. If you're using a non-relational database like Mongo, you should choose your schema as much as possible to be an embedded schema. We don't know what that means. When we talk about MongoDB, it'll be apparent to you what that means. But that has to do with normalization and splitting up multiple collections. We'll talk about that. But if you're using a non-relational database, your schema should be embedded schema. You need to provide a UML class diagram that specifies what it is that you are capturing. What are your data models, your users? These are examples of UML class diagrams from other different projects that you can use as examples. You need to my biggest suggestion is that you identify some third-party API that has lots and lots of data, right? That you can then build your application around that database, that data set. If you want to prefer to, if you find a free database from the FAA or of the FDA or that, or the MBTA has a nice huge database about trains and whatnot. That's pretty cool. There's lots of data set. If you prefer to import large data sets, that's also an alternative. Otherwise, you can head over to this website, programmableweb.com. There's quite a few of these. It's a repository of tons and tons and tons of APIs, right? That you can search by topic. I want I don't know, weather, or maybe do an application on global warming, right? I can see things, trends, and things like that, and keep track of that. So there's for any possible domain you can think of, there's an API, right? And you should use. Now, some of the APIs might have some restrictions, right? That maybe you can do. Maybe the data that you're accessing is delayed, especially like stock APIs. Typically, the data that they give you is free, but it's delayed. It's 15 minutes delayed, right? Or they might limit you if it's free and you're not paying for it. You can say you can only have 1,000 queries per day, or things like that, or at most 100 queries per hour. Right? So they'll give you some limits because they're giving it to you for free, right? So you should not have to pay for any of your data, right? Do not pay for any query or anything like that. These limits usually are plenty for our academic purposes, right? And I think that's it. So anyway, read this through again with your partners. Come back with questions. Come to my office hours Tuesdays and Fridays from 12 to noon, noon to 1. Today I'm also available 3:30 to 5. You want to come and chat, all right? Any questions? Yes.
So since you doing a movie thing? Because that was what my group had in mind, and I wasn't sure if we should get a different idea.
No, that's fine. Whatever you choose. Yeah. Obviously, I am going to do a prototype. I'm doing something about movies. Uh, so that might be a problem. We can talk about that. We can negotiate additional features.